Well, welcome to another Friday night. Last week we started looking at the 8 essential emotional needs that every person has. So we talk all the time about the 12 needs, and the question was, are there some essential core needs that show up in taking care of myself, but also in relationships? What needs need to be met in order for a relationship to be healthy? And we talked about 8 A's, 8 needs that we're going to begin with the letter A. And last week we talked about the deep need for attachment, the deep need to be authentic, and autonomy. And today I want to do the final 5 A's of these emotional needs. And I'm going to base a lot of what I say on a wonderful book by David Rico called How to Be an Adult in Relationships, the 5 Keys to Mindful Loving. Just a very helpful book. And he goes into, talks about these 5 A's as part of that book. And so I want to just take a lot of what he has said. But again, the context is quite big. So it's all about being a good parent. How am I going to meet the needs of my children? It's more than meeting their physical needs. I have to meet these 8 A's in their emotional life in order for them to develop properly. And so as we grow up, we realize that first my parents meet those needs, and then I get in relationships where other people are part of meeting those needs, but I'm also learning how to meet those needs for myself in order to take care of myself. And so all of those 8 A's begin to be met in a variety of different ways, but I have a responsibility in order to meet some of those needs. I think a critical way to look at this is a lot of people get into intimate relationships and aren't satisfied. And they go, what is necessary for my intimate relationship to be satisfying? And ultimately, it's that your partner is meeting those 8 A's and you're meeting those partners' 8 A's. These are the essential ingredients of a satisfying intimate relationship. But we went beyond that to say that another way to look at these 8 A's is basically it's what it means to love. And it's what we need to experience to feel love. And these 8 A's go beyond that. They're also what a child needs to feel safe, to feel security, to feel supported, to feel respected. It sets the foundation blocks of a healthy life. And so if a child doesn't experience these 8 A's, then they end up with little t trauma. Something's missing. There's an unresolved need, which is an unresolved pain. And so they don't feel safe. They feel alone. And that's little t trauma. And the final perspective we had on this is, as many go on their journey in recovery, they are learning self-compassion and self-care, how to take care of their inner child, how to take care of themselves. And learning how to do these 8 A's to yourself is an essential part of your recovery journey. So that was the overview of putting all of these 8 A's into context. So let's go into the 4th of the 8 A's, and it's attention. And another way to say that would be the ability to be present to somebody else. We need in our life as a child, as an adult, people who are fully present to us so that it's part of being able to attach to them. You can't attach to somebody who's distracted, who's not giving you their full attention. You need somebody to be fully present to you. And so that includes they're engaged focus on you. They're attuned to you, to your needs, to your moods. They have sensitivity to your needs, to your feelings. You're in their focus. They're looking at you, but you are in focus with them because they're giving you their full attention. This is such an important need that everybody has, starting in infancy right through all of life. When somebody is attentive to us, is present to us, we feel cared about, we feel understood in what we say and do, in who we are. It is such an important part of that attachment need. When somebody gives us their full attention, we feel like we're being taken seriously, that we're valued. We're treated as if we matter. Our intuitions matter, our thoughts matter. We're given credit where credit is due. We have high value in somebody else's mind, and they care about us and are on the lookout for us. So it sends all kinds of important messages to a person when we are give them attention, when we are present to them. But what happens if you grow up and your parents weren't present to you? Your parents were always distracted with work, their hobbies, their other things. Well, then you thought, it's your fault. It must be because you're not lovable or valuable or something's wrong with you. So it created shame. So whenever there's a lack of attention or a person being present to a child, it creates shame. It sends the message that you don't matter. You're not important. You are a burden. Other things matter more than you. Your needs aren't important. And so the child feels all of those messages, which then feels like rejection. And then they don't feel safe. Because if I don't matter, then who's going to take care of me? It goes beyond that. It also makes you feel, well, if my parents don't want to be present to me and attached to me and be attentive to me, then probably nobody will. So I guess nobody wants to connect with me. And so being authentic, then, it must be a bad thing because it results in nobody wanting to connect with you. It also sends a message to a child that if your parents aren't there for you, if they're not willing to be present to you and attuned to you, then I guess that's going to be life. People won't be there for you. You can't rely on people. People can't be trusted. And so as you can see, that's going to result in a child feeling very alone, feeling abandoned. That's a terrible emotion to feel, but it's going to create a ton of fear within that child. Fear about getting their needs met, fear about facing problems in the world all by themselves without somebody present to them. It does a lot of damage, tons of damage. It's what complex trauma is all about. So let me just put this whole attention thing in the context of parenting, that there are extremes. So the one extreme would be the helicopter parent who gives their child lots of attention, and they say, see, we're giving my child lots of attention, but really it's scrutiny type attention, making sure they don't get hurt, making sure they don't do anything wrong, making sure they're behaving properly. It's more about control and protection than it is about attachment. And so the child's not feeling loved and cared for and it's safe attachment. They're feeling smothered. And so what happens in that situation is there's a certain level of helicopter parenting, smothering the child, constant overseeing the child. It gets ramped up when they're in trouble, when they're doing something wrong, when they're not behaving properly, when they're making the parents look bad. And all of a sudden the child begins to realize this isn't about what's best for me. This is about my parents, making them look good, making them feel good. And so then they don't feel safe. They feel unloved, and it does damage. There's another extreme on the other end of the spectrum, and that's children who grew up with parents who said children should be seen and not heard. And some of you grew up with that. And it's a sad principle that many homes operated by, especially 50 years ago, 40 years ago. And the whole focus was children are to be obedient and learn to do what the parents want them to do. Children aren't to be given lots of attention. They're just to learn to obey and to do what they're supposed to do. And so that does tons of damage. There's a neglect there. I don't feel loved. I don't feel valued. I don't feel cherished. Then one of the characteristics within complex trauma families, so you can have both of those extremes in complex trauma families, but one of the things that can happen is that often a part of complex trauma families is dissociation. And so parents aren't very good at being present. They're not good at being present to themselves. They're not good at being good at present to others. They always need distractions. They're always preoccupied with stuff. They're ADHD like parents. And so children grow up with parents who are half there, parents who are in and out, parents who are constantly distracted with something. And they never get parents who are fully present to them. That does so much damage. So that dissociation thing, if it's in the parents, it will always result in child not getting the attention they need because the parents aren't capable of being present to them. So let me just kind of break that down a little bit. So a child is okay if mom's cooking supper and they're chatting about the day. They're okay with that. But if the child has a deep problem, they need mom to stop cooking for a bit and give them their full attention. And so there's this line that they know that it's okay to chat and be preoccupied with other things while we're chatting because it's somewhat superficial conversation. But once it goes below that, I need your full attention. And if you don't give it to me, it's going to feel like you don't care, that I don't matter. So that, I think children and parents kind of have a sense of that. Many children grew up where their only conversations with dad were when he was working on the car or watching sports on TV or watching something else on TV. And that was the only time they had a chance to talk to dad. And if they tried to talk about something deep, dad just kept watching TV or working on the car. And so they began to realize that sports on TV matter more than me. Dad's not willing to give them up if I have a need that requires full attention. And that does a ton of damage. And so a question you can ask yourself is, did your parent give you as much attention and care as they gave their car or a certain hobby? Many children grew up with parents who were just obsessed with their car, had all kinds of rules about what you could do in their car. Their car got more care than you did. Their car got more attention than you did. That sent a terrible message. Now, some people might argue and say, well, I don't want my child to be always wanting attention because the fear is they're going to want to be the center of attention. And that's going to make them this spotlight seeker. And so they really minimize the amount of attention they give their child for fear that they're going to be spotlight seekers. So understand this, that the desire for attention in a small child is not the desire for an audience to be the center of attention. It is the desire for a listener, for someone who cares. If you don't meet that need and give them that attention that they desperately need, then yes, they will become a spotlight seeker because they're desperate for validation and attention. Now let me switch this to the person giving attention. I will only be attentive to someone and be present to them if I value them. If they mean zero to me, if I can't stand them, I'm not going to be very present to them and give them attention. So attentiveness means that I focus on you because I respect you, and I focus on you with respect. I'm not focusing on you with contempt, judgment, ridicule, looking down on you. That's not healthy attention. That's attention in order to shame you, in order to send a negative message to you. And some kids in complex trauma, that's the only attention they got, was when they did something wrong and then their parents gave them their full attention, but it always sent a negative message. But the child basically said is, I'd rather have bad attention than no attention at all. Another thing that attentiveness, healthy attentiveness requires is no judgment. I see you for who you really are, not for who I want you to be. So if I think I can be attentive, but I'm always wanting to change a person, that's not true attentiveness. True attentiveness is, I want to know them, who they really are. I want to see the world through their eyes, to fully get them, to fully understand them. That's the goal of true attention and being present, is intimate knowledge of this person that I value. It's important to say that I can't be attentive and present to a child or to anybody if I'm in a dysregulated state. If my emotions are out of control, if I'm in my limbic brain and escalated emotionally, I will have great trouble being present to anybody. And so part of being attentive to somebody and meeting this need in somebody is I got to regulate myself. I need to have calmness. I need to be in my cortex and open. Another thing to say is that an attentive person doesn't just listen to the words that a person says. They're noticing what's behind the words. They're noticing body language. They're noticing feelings. They're putting together all the experiences to get a bigger picture of the person. And then they ask questions to get to know them more. They want to probe into those deep, important areas to better understand where that person is. So attentiveness is not just, I listen and that's it. It's, I listen, but I want to know more because I want to know you better. An attentive person doesn't just listen blankly. So they listen without judgment of the person. But if the person is saying or doing something that is unhealthy, and they've been present for that person and built that respect and that trust, then they can at times challenge them on some of their thinking and saying, are you sure you're thinking about that right? Or you're sure that behavior is going to give you the results that you're hoping for? That becomes an important part of attention after you've built trust in the relationship. Let me say a final thing about this attention. A lot of what I've focused on has been how much a child needs attention. They need parents to be present, fully present to them. It is a need that never goes away. We need somebody to be present to us all of our life. And so part of that is we need to be present to ourselves. We need to learn how to be present to ourselves and not abandon ourselves and not dissociate from ourselves. So that's key. But we need another adult who cares enough about us, who will be fully present and give the attention that we need. So this attention need is not something that I get to know a person for a few years and I go, oh, I think I know them now. I guess they don't need my attention anymore because I know them. No, you never know anybody perfectly. We are always changing and evolving, but there's always depths to us that we're discovering. And so we need to have this ongoing attention and presence to keep continuing to know the person better, to know the parts of them that are changing, to know the parts of them that have been hidden. So somebody has said people are like a kaleidoscope. Every turn in life leads to, like the turning of a kaleidoscope, new perspectives, things that we've never seen before. And it's because we're intricate, complex beings. It's an ongoing need. So that's attention. The next one is also just huge, acceptance. We have this deep, deep need, if we're going to be healthy, to be fully accepted. And what that means is acceptance is approval of our authentic self. of our basic personality, our basic body, who we are, our deepest drives, our passions, our talents, our abilities, how we think, our emotional makeup. So acceptance means we are received respectfully with all our feelings, choices, personality traits, and supported through those choices. That is what lets us know it's safe to be authentic. It's safe to be who we are, to be ourselves. And when we feel safe to be authentic, then that enables us to grow in becoming intimate. Because it's safe to be open and vulnerable, authentic, because I'm accepted. And that brings about deeper intimacy, deeper attachment, which is what we long for. In acceptance, when I'm accepted, I'm embraced as worthy. I feel, wow, I have value. I don't need to conform to somebody else's standard in order to get acceptance. I don't have to try to fit in order to get acceptance. Love and acceptance is not conditional. I'm accepted and loved just the way I am. That is so critical. Now, what makes that so challenging, though, is that every child is unique. Every child has a different personality, different looks, different voice, different body, different interests, different abilities, different deficiencies. That should not cause insecurity in a child just because they're different. They should be very secure in that because they're fully accepted by their parents. They might be an odd duck. They might be quite different from people in a lot of ways, but if they're fully accepted by their parents, it's one of the greatest gifts that you can give that child, because they know that though they're different, that doesn't mean that's bad or wrong. It means they're unique. It means they still have value, and they have great value, and that just lets them be at peace and secure. Such an important gift. But complex trauma does so much damage in this area. Acceptance and love were conditional. You had to fit into kind of the family's unhealthy dynamic box. You had to fit into mom and dad's plans for you. They wanted you to have this career, this much money. They wanted you to fit into their morals and values, even though they might have been kind of weird from a certain religion. They did not accept you for who you were. And so life was not about being authentic, it was about conforming. And then if you conformed, they gave you acceptance, but you didn't feel totally accepted because they weren't accepting you for who you were, they were accepting you for conforming. And that still sent the message of shame that you're not good enough the way you are. You're only good enough if you become what they want you to be. And it did terrible damage. And so lack of acceptance or conditional acceptance results in huge shame messages. Something's wrong with me the way I am. That's why I'm not accepted. I'm not good enough. I must be bad. That can lead to self-hatred. I hate myself, and that's happened to many people. But it also results in feeling rejected all the time for who I am. I just feel this rejection. And then it results in tons of insecurities as I go through life. What do people think of me? Do they think I'm weird? Or are others going to reject me? And so the whole thing it sets up is children who feel like they don't fit in, they don't belong, and the only way to do that is to conform. So they can be in the middle of a group, big event, thousands of people, and feel all alone, that they don't fit in, and so they try to conform. They do what the group says you need to do to fit in. And for a while it seems like they are accepted, but it doesn't satisfy because they realize I'm only accepted if I continue to conform. I'm never accepted for who I am. So again, I feel like an outsider, a black sheep, like I don't fit in. And that happens so much in complex trauma. So let me switch it to what the parents need as their internal world in order to be able to give this kind of acceptance to children. So first, you have to be free of preconceived plans and agendas for your children. You can't be saying they have to fit this certain education and career and money and status and have this kind of house and this kind of spouse, etc., and choose this certain kind of lifestyle. You got to be free of that. You got to go, my goal is to find out who they are, not who I want them to be. What happens for many children is they're not like the parents wanted them to be, and then the parents are disappointed in the child. But when you think about that, it's like the parents are saying, you broke the bargain we had that you were going to be this. Well, no, they didn't break the bargain. They never entered that bargain. You were the one that made the bargain for them. And now you're disappointed because they didn't keep the bargain that you made that they never agreed to. That does so much damage. So you have to be free of kind of that agenda for your child of what you want them to be. Secondly, you have to accept your child, their basic personality and body. Now that is difficult for many because you might be, let's say, a father who loves sports, who's very good with cars and is really big into that. And then you get a boy who's very feminine, who loves cooking, who doesn't like sports at all, and you just struggle with connecting with them. You think they're kind of weak, they're sissy-like. You've got to come to accept who your child is. You may not like it. It might make it difficult to connect. You might not even agree with some of the things that they want to do. And it's not like they're morally wrong. It's just they want to go and do dance. And that just bothers you. And so you have to get through some of your biases and some of your preset definition of what that child should be if they're male or female. What I would add here is when we come to acceptance, we're talking about basic personality, basic looks, body, basic drives, emotional makeup. When a child makes choices that are unloving, so they lie, they cheat, we go, okay, I'm not going to accept that because that's hurting them, it's hurting other people. And I go, right, so we're not accepting unloving behaviors. And so that would have kind of a moral type of code to it, that these are unloving behaviors. So when we see that, there's going to be consequences to help you choose loving behaviors. But we fully still accept you. It's just that action that is bothering us. Where this has to be, one has to be careful about this, is that some people create this moral code and they think it's a good moral code, but if you examine it, it's not truly all about love. Some of their moral code is made up of interpretations of their religion, of the teaching they were raised with and the logic they were raised with, that you shouldn't do this, this is wrong, etc. Those people that engage in that aren't doing anything unloving at all, but you were taught that that was wrong. And so it's so important when you start to think about the moral aspect that you make sure that your moral code box is about love and not about some potentially flawed teaching that you received. So let me put it this way. When a child comes into the world, they are perfectly them. They do not need to change their basic personality to become something that is not them. They just need to be able to develop fully into that personality, into their abilities and talents. They are perfectly them. And so it is so important for parents to fully accept that and to nurture them, getting to know who they are and to develop who they are so that they can pursue their dreams and being totally effective in society. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about, again, if a child decides to pursue maladaptive ways of coping, lying and stealing and addiction. Those we go, okay, I still accept and love you, but I can't accept that behavior because it's hurting you, it's hurting others. And so those things need to change. But in many cases, what you begin to realize is you just don't change maladaptive behaviors overnight. You don't go, hey, I've been eating wrong, very unhealthy ways for years. I need to stop that. And all of a sudden, magically, you're going to start eating healthy overnight. Rarely does that happen. Now you have to accept that the process of change is quite slow and messy in those type of areas. So don't beat yourself up every time you don't do it perfectly right. So that's acceptance. Such an important one. The next one is kind of tied to acceptance, is appreciation. And it really is what gives depth to acceptance. So you could have a parent who fully accepted you, but they never told you. They never showed that with anything visible, anything tangible. And so what this is saying is we need to be fully accepted as a child, but we need to have that communicated to us. So we need a parent who says, I admire you. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Man, I'm so grateful for you. I respect you. They give me a hug, and you just feel their acceptance. It's more than just an attitude. It's an attitude that's conveyed to the child. And so that says in a more powerful way that the child needs that I am seen, I am valued, I am appreciated. It's validation. And so we need to be accepted, but that then needs to be validated. And that has to be communicated to us. And so when that is communicated to us, it feeds a growing healthy self-image, self-identity, a growing healthy self-respect. It helps us to see ourselves accurately. It helps us to have security and to just rest and relax in the love of somebody else. It fosters closeness, warmth, attachment. It makes relationships special. So this whole appreciation thing is such an important part. It's giving appropriate validation. So John Gottman in his research has found that the ratio of appreciation to complaint in a relationship, so we still need to point out flaws, mistakes, but the ratio that we need 5 times more appreciation than we need complaint. And I think that is so important to keep in mind in an intimate relationship and in parenting. We need a lot more appreciation, encouragement, validation than we do criticism and pointing out flaws. The next A is affection. And this is how we give and receive love. And so we've done a talk on the 5 love languages, and this is what really this affection is about. It is basically going that it's one thing to say, I love you to a person, but does the person feel that love? What does it take for a person to feel loved? And that's where everybody's different. And so some people, they feel love when you say it to them. Others, when you give gifts to them. Others, when you do acts of service for them and you make sacrifices for them. You do things specially for them. Others, they get that through focused quality time with them. and then others through the physical affection, hugs, sex, etc. So affection is basically learning how to communicate love to each child. So a lot of parents in complex trauma say, I loved all my kids the same. The problem is, not all the kids felt loved. Only the ones whose love language matched up to the way the parent was loving. Whereas the others didn't feel love at all because their love language and how they feel love was very different. And so if we're going to meet the needs of a person, we have to learn their love language and learn how to love them in a way that is meaningful to them. Now that's significant if let's say that my love language is very much the focus quality time with a person. Whereas my one child is gifts. My other child is hugs. But let's say I'm an introvert and I don't like hugs a whole lot. So what I have to do is learn a language foreign to me. Maybe I'm not a big gift kind of person. Gifts don't mean a lot to me, but that other child, I have to learn a different language. So my language might be English, but theirs might be Chinese and French. And I got to learn these different languages. And they're not my mother tongue, but I can learn to be fluent in those languages. And if I'm going to be a good parent and if I'm going to be a good spouse, I need to learn my spouse's affection language. That becomes so important because it's when they feel loved that they feel special. They feel desired. They feel they have value. They feel accepted. They feel safe. There's an emotional warmth that they feel seen, and it's very nurturing. So basically it's saying that affection is tailor-making love to each person based on their love language, what makes them feel loved and special. And so it's something we have to learn, something that takes getting to know the person. Keep in mind that this is including kind of two areas. So there's often going to be a physical expression and an emotional expression. So the physical way of showing love can be just a touch, a hug, sex. All of those, there's a spectrum there. There's physical ways of showing affection, but there's emotional ways of showing affection, thoughtfulness, kindness, playfulness. All of those are involved in this. So love languages, physical and emotional, are important. Now, having said this, it's so important to understand that some people think, okay, I'll just show their love language occasionally when it suits me. And I go, no, that doesn't work. In order to do this affection thing properly, it has to be attunement, presence all the time, frequent attachment connection. So that means I got to be close to the person, attuned to the person, present to the person, available to the person, consistent, ongoing. If I'm going to do this properly. This is not just hit and miss when it suits me. I need to add just a caution here. This affection thing is often a key part of foreplay when people are having sex. It's part of doing what causes the other to feel loved and special, and that often can lead to sex. The danger for many people is that they then use this affection thing as a way to get sex, as a way to manipulate their partner to give them sex. But that always backfires eventually because your partner begins to realize the only reason they're being kind to me today is because they want something. And I know what they want and I don't want to give it, so now I resent that they're using this affection stuff. So when you think of sex, think of this. Healthy, satisfying sex needs to contain all 8 A's. It needs to contain attachment at a deep level emotionally. It needs to contain authenticity, right? The person can be totally real. They just don't have to be what you want them to be. It needs to include total acceptance. All of the A's. If they're not part of your sexual experience, then probably your sexual experience isn't as satisfying as it could be. One final thing to say about this affection thing. We all know that relationships have different aspects to them. So we can have very warm times, very fun times, but we can have conflict, and that's an important, necessary part of relationships. We're not always going to agree on things. So conflict. So what does affection look like with conflict? It's very easy to think of affection when everybody's warm, when it's very romantic and positive. But what about conflict? What does affection look like with conflict? To me, affection means you patiently work through a problem, seeking to resolve it, while maintaining respect in tone, in attitude to the other person. You regularly, during the conflict, say words of encouragement. Okay, we're making progress. We're getting this. That was a great point. You highlight the positives. So affection doesn't have that emotional warmth so much in conflict. It's an attitude. An attitude of positive respect, encouragement that is so important. Let me go to the final A and call it allowing. And it's being allowed, a child being allowed to show, to live out all their needs, but their deepest drives and wishes. So that a child comes into the world and they begin to realize, I want to be an athlete. And so they're encouraged to try different sports, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be a musician. And they're encouraged to explore, to be creative, to try new things, to pursue these deep passions. They're allowed to explore. That's what we're talking about here. This is so important for a child's development. But if you think about it, what does that mean for a parent? That means that a parent must be willing to tolerate chaos and mess. That means a parent must be flexible and allow children to do things that might be outside of the parent's comfort zone. It also means that a parent must allow a child to pursue destinations, careers, where they're going in life that might be different from what the parent thought the child might end up in. The parent might have a huge thing that I don't want my child to become an artist or musician because they never make any money, and the parent's all about getting rich and being well established. And so they resist the child doing that. But you might have to change some of your thinking to allow your child to pursue those deeply ingrained, what they're born with, drives and passions and pursuits. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that you may have grown up with a certain amount of conditioning that women don't do these things, men don't do these things, or you just don't get into art, you don't get into these music because there's no money. And that might have been part of your conditioning. You might have to face some of that because those are now unhealthy biases for you that can really hurt the child. So let me bring this to complex trauma a bit. So in complex trauma, most children are in survival mode. And so it's about becoming what others need them to be, or becoming what they think they need to be in order to get their needs met. They can't pursue their own drives. They're always trying to become what others want or to get their needs met. In a healthy home, a child's allowed to explore. That's part of the purpose of play, is they can begin to try all kinds of different things and find out what they're good at, find out what they like, what they have a passion for. And parents allow that. It is safe to do that. I remember growing up that our living room often looked like a gymnasium. We put all the couches against the wall, and then we had open space. We set up volleyball nets, we played war, we played hockey, and my parents allowed it. And I look back on it and I go, wow, the noise that they had to put up with, the chaos, the mess that they had to put up with, but they were allowing us to explore. And that to me was such a gift to us. So to the parents, this means you might have to give up some of control, where you're trying to get your child to exactly where you want them to be, to get the education career that you want them to have. You're not going to be manipulating them anymore to follow your agenda. You're going to be discovering with them what they're good at, what they have a passion for. Many children in complex trauma, obedience wasn't just obeying good moral rules about love. Obedience was submission, not just to love, but to the wishes of their parents for them. And so it wasn't about what their own needs and values and drives were. It was about submitting to the parents' drives for them. That kind of compliance, submission, usually ends up defiance. Because the child begins to realize this isn't about what's best for me. This is all about what mom and dad and their image and their dreams, and they begin to rebel. And so it backfires for them. So a big thing that I want parents to see is, if you're going to allow your child to explore, you have to face your own fear. Fear that they might get hurt. Fear that they might not choose what you want. Fear that they might choose something that others aren't going to respect in your culture. It could be all kinds of different fears that you need to face. But that is really what's behind it. If you don't allow your child to explore, is your own fear. There's another piece here. Part of allowing our children to explore is the realization that if they explore their drives, their talents, they might end up in a job or a career that takes them far away from me. And they might move to the other side of the world. And so I'm not just allowing them to pursue their passions and talents, I'm letting them go. I'm freeing them up, even if it means they move away from me. And so that means my parenting can't be about meeting my needs. I want them close to me. I want them to be my best friend where I can talk to them every day. I want them to be the best they can be, even if I don't get all of my wishes met. And so there's two parts of maturation in a person. One is to develop into a unique person, and then that always involves at some point separating to a degree from your parents. That's what we're talking about in this allowing them. It's giving them the gift of freedom to become themselves. Now I need to add one other piece here. Many complex trauma families have a lot of fear as parents. Fear of their children not wanting a relationship, fear of their children moving away from them, fear of their children making bad decisions, fear of their children getting hurt, all fear. But often what they do is play a little game of deception. They don't admit their own fear, but they try to make it, oh, it's a big bad world out there that I'm trying to protect you from. So you need to be afraid of the big bad world. So they're actually taking their fear and trying to put it into their child and making it about the world is bad and dangerous. And that's what all of this is about. No, it's not. It's about your own fear. What you are assuming with that is that you aren't giving your child the tools to navigate that big bad world. That your child's not capable of navigating that big bad world. That child's too stupid. That child can't learn. You're sending all kinds of messages that are going to cause that child to have shame, but to rebel. So face your fear and give your child the tools to face that world. And what you'll find is that they'll probably do it quite well. So that's the 8 A's. I hope you found that helpful. I just think they're so important to understand, and they're the key to healthy relationships. Okay, that's the end of our Friday night. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.